Welcome back, everybody. It is Tuesday night, and this is Vetted VA Live. If you tuned in last week, because I know everyone waits for Tuesday night to get all of their VA mortgage and real estate information, but last Tuesday was Halloween, so we took a week off, but back again here with a group of vetted pros on the real estate and mortgage side, and a cool topic group tonight. We actually have a little bit of a catch-all, but really, they all kind of relate back to affordability and some affordability solutions and how the VA financing relates back into that. So before we jump in, we'll get everyone here introduced. Jason Rivera is here in with me in Southern California. San Diego is a realtor in the San Diego area. Deb, how do you pronounce your last name? I should have clarified that before we jumped on. Haberney, and on the other side of the country, on the other coast in Charleston, South Carolina. And then we're going to jump to the other direction across all of the water. And we've got Stephanie Staffholm, loan officer in Hawaii. So with that, why don't we kind of start the discussion of why this stuff all relates back to affordability? And the two big ones, and the ones we're going to jump into first here, really are using your VA benefit to finance a purchase of 2 to 4 units, owner-occupied units, or what we're seeing everywhere around the country. Governments are getting more, state governments, city governments are getting more and more lenient with building accessory dwelling units, and everyone has questions with how this relates back to using your VA benefit. We're going to transition a little bit into tiny houses, log homes, other stuff. But Jason, from the real estate side, what are the benefits, or why would people be reaching out and asking you about ADUs, properties with ADUs, or looking at 2, 3, 4 units versus a single family residence?
You kind of already hit it, which was affordability, right? Being in San Diego, affordability is a huge aspect when you're looking to buy here because of the home prices. So when you're looking at ADUs, or thinking about ADUs or multifamilies, it's typically to offset your mortgage. Renting out the ADU and you occupying the primary, or you occupying the ADU and renting out the primary to help offset or cover a good portion of that mortgage. And the same goes for the multifamilies.
Kind of one of the other reasons that we sometimes hear about people thinking about an ADU is multi-generational stuff. Would you say that kind of takes a back seat to affordability, or you get people that are looking for having quarters for either an adult child or a parent that needs somewhere to stay?
You brought up a great point, and I kind of forgot about that because that was actually a really big discussion point during COVID, actually, including myself. A lot of families had, COVID came on pretty rapidly and disrupted a lot of families. Some families had lost loved ones and left, maybe, a senior generation just kind of living by themselves. And so, including myself, multifamily was one of the reasons we actually moved during COVID, was to find something that was multi-generational. So I would agree with that. That is definitely something that has come into play. I haven't seen it recently, but it was certainly top of mind the last 3 years.
I would say, from my perspective, again, we're both here in Southern California. Affordability is a big issue. Stephanie, Hawaii, affordability is a big issue. Debbie, in South Carolina, nowhere with prices elevated and interest rates higher is affordability not an issue. But would you say in your market, it's looking into units or ADUs is more of an affordability play, or more of that multi-generational, or some of both?
Definitely more of an affordability play. As a matter of fact, I'm closing on a multi-unit for VA tomorrow. And what he'll walk away with is a home to live in, 3 other units rented, and all this extra income that he'll be making from the revenue off of those rentals. So definitely, it's the second 4-unit plex that I've closed in a month, and it's a great investment. And I'm telling you right now, some of the properties are under 400,000. I mean, can you imagine? Like, that's just unbelievable for a 4-plex.
No, you see Jason and Stephanie and I go, no, we cannot imagine multiple units for $400,000, not in our wildest dreams.
Right. And the rent factor is still high on those units, right? So the price, the purchase price is still around that $350, $380. And they're still able to collect the rent anywhere from $1,200 to $1,800 per unit. So it's definitely an affordability play.
We had a question here. We didn't jump out and clarify it, but Jamaica would like to know, what are ADUs? Stephanie, you want to kind of give, we'll go deeper. I think we're going to talk about the units first and then transition more into ADUs, but just give a quick definition of what an ADU is for anyone tuning in going, what are these crazy people talking about?
So ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit, and it's a unit on a single family home property that is smaller than the main property, the main unit. So other names for it are mother-in-law apartment, Ohana unit, the cottage above the garage. It's like there's different names for it, but the name being used right now is ADU.
Perfect. And we actually had a comment here that I forgot to state at the top of the show. So someone had mentioned to their friend, Jake Wright, watch this live, ask about ADUs in real time. The most important thing here, we obviously cover a topic every week and we go and take a deep dive on that. But the most important thing we can do is answer your questions. So if you have a question on multiple units, ADUs, log homes, tiny homes, any of that fun stuff, anything that I didn't mention, but it is related to your VA benefits and mortgage and real estate, we're definitely here to answer. So absolutely jump into that. So Debbie, I kind of want to circle back and let's kind of go through some of the differences. Most people, probably 95% of people using their VA benefit to buy are looking at a single family residence. What are some of the things that a buyer needs to be aware of when they're looking at 2 to 4 units versus just a single family?
Yeah, one thing that we ran into is insurance. The insurance is much higher for a multi-family home. You got to consider there's 4 units versus the 1 unit. So it's definitely going to be a much higher insurance cost. So that's something to consider.
Now, again, when we relate back to affordability and are thinking in terms of, cool, I have these other units that I can rent out and bring in some income. How does that income relate to qualifying for the mortgage?
It's actually not too much more complicated because you could use the income from the other units to help offset the cost of that payment. And so when you talk about making it affordable, you can use, and a lot of the units that I'm seeing are already rented out. And so we're just taking the lease that currently exists in building that into our application, into our loan officers. We call it a 1003, but we build that income into that income calculation to help offset the costs.
So maybe an example would be helpful here. And you have this one. So 4 units that you just did. How much additional income did you realize in terms of qualifying income from the additional 3 units in that property?
Yeah. So right now the market rent that they had on their lease, and all the leases were under market rent. So, and he was still going to walk away with a good $2,500 to $3,000 on top of his mortgage payment.
So you already boggled our mind with the $4,000 4 units, but now you
Right.
said $2,500 to $3,000 of rents. What was the total payment for that borrower?
His payment was roughly around $2,300 a month.
So he's going to get to live free.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He'll live for free for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, sort of where I like to go back with that, Jason, I know in these high cost areas, we get this all the time. Get a phone call. Someone says, "Hey, want to buy a house? I'm going to house hack. I've got a bunch of friends and we're going to put them all in the other rooms and qualify." How would you compare the units or the people that you have reaching out to you for units versus people who might be saying, "Hey, we want a house hack," or one of my buddies is going to rent a room, and any difficulties that you may have with that?
Renting a room versus buying a multifamily?
Yep.
Okay. Just make sure I'm following the question. So it kind of depends. I would say most people that are reaching out typically shoot for the multifamily. And then we go to qualification. There's always a kind of a line in the sand where it's like, all right, multifamily, because it is a high priced area, our multifamilies are not 400,000. We're probably doubling, tripling that. And we're not cash flowing. Not all areas are going to cash flow like that. I would imagine Hawaii is probably a very similar situation. It's going to help offset your mortgage, but it's not, you're not going to live for free. But there's typically a line in the sand where someone's trying to get qualified for that multifamily, and we're trying to utilize the rent to help offset that mortgage, but they just may not make that cusp of be able to get into a multifamily. And then that's kind of when they fall back to the idea of like, well, I can't afford a single family home. I can't really make that multifamily home. And then it's like, let's look at a condo townhome situation where maybe we can get into like a 3-bedroom because it's still, affordable, at least in San Diego sense. And then we can rent out those additional bedrooms. And that's kind of what I've really seen here is kind of that most people are shooting for the bigger object. And then we kind of work our way back to say, all right, here's where your finances are falling in. To afford a multifamily, we would need these stars to align. Is that realistic for your situation? Probably not. Let's look at this other alternative. And just one more thing to say, a lot of people think that they're going to cash flow better on a multifamily. And in some cases, because condos and townhomes are significantly lower costs and they can be found in 2, 3, 4 bedrooms, those in some cases can actually be more beneficial to the client as far as trying to offset their mortgage than actually the multifamily. So,
and I think that's an important part of the discussion. So it's interesting that 3 of the 4 of us are in really high priced markets, and it kind of changes this because I have a couple of friends that are in markets that are more like South Carolina, up in Minnesota, in the Midwest, where you're like, why would you not buy your first home as units? Because it's so financially advantageous. Whereas for us, the cost structure is so different. Stephanie, how does that compare for you in Hawaii? Are there a significant amount of 2 to 4 unit properties even available to buy? And how does that mix kind of present itself to your clientele? I know the buyers are a little bit different in Hawaii than other parts of the country, but how does that relate to both your active duty and no longer active duty, and how they're looking at the available mix of inventory in Hawaii and sort of navigating the affordability piece?
Well, I mean, I would say, we still have, the same service members and veterans that, are PCSing here, either, in service or even DOD, right? It's the same people that are PCSing to San Diego or South Carolina or wherever. But there has to be a little bit of a shift in the way that they're thinking about the investment, right? So we get a lot of people calling me, they've gotten orders and they've been watching all the house hacking videos and things like that, right? And so they want to get into a multi-unit property right away. And unfortunately, at least here in Oahu, we don't have a lot of true multifamilies. And so what I mean by that is it doesn't matter what the listing says. If the listing can say multi-unit, multi-family property, but the tax records call it a single family home with an ADU. And so qualifying for those 2 things is very different. And so we get the call for the people that want the multifamilies, and we have to have the discussion about that inventory really doesn't exist. And if it does, it's gone very, very quickly. But what does exist are these single families with ADUs, and you have to qualify for that full amount of the single family home, though. But we have that conversation. We do have people also house hacking the condos, right? A 3-bedroom, like Jason said, and actually, even the people who are renting those properties, if there's someone with BAH, right, $2,000 as a single person, and they're paying $1,000 in rent, they're still pocketing $1,000. From their side, it's nice too. So, it's a conversation that we have though with the buyers when they first get orders, or they know they're moving to Hawaii or wanting to buy here, about what are their end goals, how long are they going to keep the property, do they truly understand what multifamily property looks like here in Hawaii?
And I think it's an important part of this discussion.
I don't know if that answers your question, Josh.
No, it absolutely does. It's a deep discussion, and everyone thinks of it differently. I think we're all, whether we're in real estate or mortgage, get people saying, "Hey, affordability is crazy. I still want to own. I've seen this information online. I've seen this information online, and this is how I'm planning to get through it." But then they talk to us, and then we have the reality of qualifying for the mortgage. So you and Jason both just kind of talked about the differences of units, generally a higher purchase price, a little bigger down payment. We didn't go too deep in the weeds on the qualifying. There's some issues with reserves and things of that sort. But the big one that I get all the time is people calling, and not necessarily just veterans or VA eligible borrowers, people want to do FHA or 3% down conventional. And they call up and say, well, we're going to house hack, or I've got two friends, they don't have great credit. I have the money, or my dad's going to give me a down payment. My mom's going to give me a down payment. I'm going to buy the house. Stephanie, why don't you walk us through a little bit of the difference of someone trying to house hack a single family home and you getting them qualified versus someone saying, I'm buying this 3-unit building and I want to get qualified and use those rents. Because I think it's an important distinction that most people that are making content online telling people, hey, you can house hack, here's how you can get into a home, they gloss over it.
Josh, I'm having trouble hearing you. You're cutting out. I didn't hear that. Sorry.
Jason, Deb, are you guys able to hear me, or was it cutting out for you guys as well?
No, I can hear you fine.
Okay, so, well, Debbie, you're dealing with
sorry.
No worries, Debbie. You're dealing with the same issue in terms of that. So if someone calls you and comes up with the idea, they're not interested in 2, 3, 4 units, but they're saying, hey, I've got a couple friends. I'm gonna buy, and they're gonna rent from me. Not gonna co-borrow. They want to do that whole house hacking idea. Maybe walk us through what that looks like in terms of you getting them qualified and why that can be more difficult than looking at buying units.
Yeah, I mean, because unfortunately, we can't use any of those hackers' income, to help them qualify for that house that they want to purchase. So it would really be the person who's going to be buying the house, qualifying on their income and their situation alone. And although they have this idea that they're going to, hack or, let some roommates come in and share that expense, it's nothing that we can unfortunately include when we're doing our pre-qualification for them. So yeah, I do get that sometimes. And that tends to be, with our first-time home buyers or younger singletons that kind of want to get out there and buy a home. But, unfortunately, if they don't have that, again, the good income, the low debt, and this is, across the board, I'm not just talking VA, we can't really use those hackers' income to help offset that.
And from that perspective, that's one of the things where if you're looking,
there is one situation. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say there is one situation where you can use the hackers' income, and that is if the hackers have lived with you for the last 2 years, right? If the same people that are going to live with you and your new unit and have been paying you rent for the last 2 years and you have it on your tax returns, you could possibly use their income at the next property. That's the only way on a VA loan.
And the biggest issue with it, I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen it. I've never seen someone declare it. I've seen someone have that person that was living with them for the last 2 years, but I have yet to see someone volunteer to tell the IRS, hey, I have this additional income and I'd like to pay you some taxes on it. So it exists in the guidelines in the real world, not nearly as much. But what I was going to say, this is one of the areas where the VA guidelines are very helpful because we can go to much higher debt to income ratios for well-qualified borrowers. If you're trying to house hack and you're going to get an FHA loan, we have that hard and fast 47% housing to income ratio, and it's not going anywhere. No exceptions, no ifs, ands, or buts. With the VA, if you meet the residual income requirements, you could possibly go higher. So house hacking into a single family or a condo is probably easier with the VA than it is on other types, but still not as easy as looking at units where we can just straight up use that rental income to help you qualify. We actually have a number of good questions here. It's funny, we were talking here before the show. You never really know what topic is going to be of interest to people, but everyone was highly interested in 2 to 4 units and accessory dwelling units. So we have a couple of questions here, and what you guys are going to see, most of the guidelines are pretty well defined, and you can ask 20 people and they're going to give you the same answers. Some of these things fall in gray areas, and there's going to be an it depends. So we'll probably do sort of a roundtable on these, get everyone's opinions of how it comes down in their area, and get you the best info possible. So here's a good one to start. Put 2 tiny homes and a garage. Is that possible? Jason, I'm going to nominate you to start with that one. And what are your thoughts when you hear that question?
So it depends. First thing is it depends on your location. Tiny homes are fairly new when it comes to how they're going to regulate it. So how does your state, county, and if you live in a city, what are their building codes regarding tiny homes? I don't know, so can't really answer you exactly what that would be. As far as the VA goes, can you buy a piece of land, build a small home on it, and put a garage on it? The answer would be yes, as long as it meets your NPRs and appraises that value. That's not an issue. Putting a second home after the fact, another tiny home, that would be something that you'd have to go about trying to finance that separately, because you're not actually building a multifamily, you're building 2 separate tiny homes. So depending on if you were to build it maybe like a miniature duplex, using like a one-time close, that could be an actual potential option. It might be bigger than what would be the definition of a tiny home. I think that kind of answers it. I think that's yeah.
No, I think it absolutely does. And it's an interesting question because it's literally 2 sentences, but there's a lot there to unpack. All of those things, you nailed it, that you can do. Can you buy land? Yes. Can you build? Yes. Is the VA in theory open to a tiny home? Yes. Will the VA allow an ADU, which the second tiny home would kind of be an ADU? All of those individually are a yes, but it's how does it come together? And how do any particular lenders look at it? So, Stephanie, Deb, do you have any other insights onto how you would answer that question? Or if someone asked you that info, you might like them to have?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're following VA guidelines, and 2 tiny homes, which one is going to be your primary residence? Like you said, maybe the one is an ADU, you keep the wheels on it, and it's, that sort of thing. I'm not sure on that one, but you definitely, would only be limited to your primary residence for the VA funding. And yeah, that's, I think Jason nailed it though. All of those individually make sense when you put it all together. And the next thing is, can you get a fair appraisal? Who else has the tiny home on the land with a separate garage? That's going to be tough. And that's probably the biggest hurdle, I think, for most lenders, is finding a good appraisal to help establish a value for that loan.
Well, let's talk a little bit. The question came up. We're talking about tiny homes. So this is something that isn't in the guidelines, but we had some vetted VA members at a VA conference here recently, and the question was asked because VA does not strictly have a minimum property size requirement. They have some requirements. As Jason said, you have to meet all of the minimum property requirements. And technically each unit has to have a living space, a sleeping space, cooking and dining, and sanitary facilities. So within that, it's okay, it can't be too small. I mean, you couldn't really do all that in 100 feet. So is it 200 feet? Is it 300 feet? Is it 400? You guys also pointed out something really important there. Let's say you could build 200 square feet that has all of those things, meets all of the NPRs. How do we appraise it? Are there others around? So there's really a number of questions there yet to be answered. So we're going to have a few brave volunteers that are going to step out and try and do this, both the buyers, borrowers that are going to be building this stuff and doing those loans, and the professionals that are going to help them with it, because that's what it comes down to. Stephanie, from that perspective, let's say you had someone come to you that wanted to do this, and you've kind of gone through in your head, okay, it seems doable. Maybe explain why we now not only have to determine, is it okay with VA, but now we have to match it up to a lender that's okay with it, even if it does meet the VA guidelines. What does that look like if you have someone wanting to do this?
So we're talking about building or purchasing a tiny home.
Any and all of it. We don't need to get bogged down in the details of it. These are all unique situations. What is your first step? Because we can look at it. We just all kind of agreed, kind of in theory, all those things seem possible, but we would have to clarify it. And then our next step is now we got to find a lender that agrees that VA is good with it.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
So I think our first step would be a conversation. Oh, sorry. So it keeps kind of going out, so I can't tell when you're finishing talking. Sorry about that. We'd have a conversation about, yes, is it something you want to purchase, a tiny home that already exists? In that case, it does have to be a home that's affixed on a foundation, right? And meets all the minimum property requirements, MPRs, Chapter 12 of the VA handbook. In some areas, that's going to be easier to find than others. And we could go through the process and get to the appraisal, and there aren't enough comps. So that's something that we'd have a conversation with your real estate agent ahead of time. Hey, if you're interested in this property, let's see if there's even comps for that property with that tiny home on it. So I think a lot of it is just having that conversation with your team, right? Your real estate agent and your loan officer, so that when you find what you're looking for, you're not surprised that it's doable or not doable. And yes, and like for example, I'm a broker. We're going to try to find a lender that is a little bit more flexible with these different kind of properties, right? Not a lot of lender overlays.
Absolutely. We've got a chunk of questions here. So more than what we normally get, which is awesome. So let's jump in and kind of look at a few of these here. We have another one here. Someone's looking to buy a stick-built home, immediately rent it out, but still live on the property in my fifth wheel. So it's funny. All these questions have little layers to them. Is this possible? I have all my mail delivered to the home address and renters use a PO box for legality purposes. Debbie, what are your thoughts when you see that question of buying a home, renting it, and living on the property in a fifth wheel? How does that meet our VA occupancy requirements or not meet our VA occupancy requirements? And anything else there that sticks out to you that this person should be considering?
Yeah, so I immediately go to that the VA occupancy requirement, which is that you will live in the home as a primary residence within a reasonable time after closing, and so that building a stick-built house for the purpose of renting it out would not meet VA standards. And so, maybe if they were going to live in that stick-built house and maybe rent out the third wheel, maybe that's an option that they want to consider. But if they're going into this with the intention of renting it out, I would say, we're at a hard stop there.
My thought, maybe I'm a bad son-in-law, because when I saw that, I was like, maybe you live in the house and the in-laws can go in the fifth wheel, and that way we got all of our problems solved there.
I would have no problem putting my mother-in-law in that fifth wheel.
So let's look here. Again, some of these questions are longer, so I'm trying to just make sure. I want to purchase a duplex / multifamily, have my children there, and they will pay rent to me. Is that feasible? Or can I have one of my children sign with me if they also have income? So this one, again, relates back to VA being a little bit interesting. We can't have the children as a co-borrower unless they are also veterans. But Jason, you want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah. So as long as the children, I'm assuming these children are adults, and have,
the 10-year-olds, they send them off to the salt mines to get some exactly every day. And
so,
as
long as the children, are adults, have jobs, and you're going to take them, like they're actually going to pay you rent, that's not an issue. You can rent out those extra units to anyone. So that's definitely a feasible option. As far as having a child sign with you, I'll turn that over to Stephanie or Deborah if they want to cover the requirements for that.
Yeah, I mean, that would just fall under a child. I mean, I would imagine if they're an adult child, this is what we're referring to, and the adult child is employed and employable and has income. I mean, I wouldn't see it any different than, a joint loan, really.
And it might be
The
a
key
really
here
good.
is, I think in that question, I don't know if this is what I'm getting out of the question, that the veteran has to occupy the property unless
Correct.
they're a service member. And, so I don't know if that's what the question is basically asking. If, can I let my kids live there? Can my kids co-sign? And therefore I don't live there. No, you have to live there
Correct.
as your primary residence in one of the units.
Jake is worried that we skipped your question. Jake, we did not. Your question was really long. I needed them to answer a question so I could read your question and make sure you didn't sneak anything inappropriate that I would get fired for showing it up here. So here is Jake's long question. Ladies, I apologize. The question is long enough that it just made you disappear from the screen, but we'll take the question down once we get through it. So currently in a VA loan for my house. Can I use it again to build an ADU? So let's just try and remember these. So when I take this down, we can answer it. Does it matter for the amount I'm currently using? He's got about a $625,000 loan. Is this possible? Would I need a conventional loan, if that'd even be possible? And a HELOC maybe to cover the cost of the new build. So there's some other questions there, but why don't we jump into that first part of the question? Owns the home, would like to build an ADU, owes about $625 on it. So there's definitely some gaps there of some information that if you guys or I were talking to him on the phone, we'd go into some more detail, get some more info. But Stephanie, what are your initial thoughts when you hear that? Our transmission lines over to Hawaii are not doing well at all tonight. So Debbie, you in South Carolina are going to get to answer this since the internet is working a little bit better for you there. When you hear this question of someone, with a home with a VA loan wanting to add the ADU, where do they start? What are their options?
Yeah, so my initial thought is again, we get back, is this going to be a primary residence, right? So the VA loan is to be used for a primary residence. And so this is an ADU add-on. That would be my question there.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading. He owns the home already with a VA loan on it, owner occupied, and is wanting to add the ADU to the back of the property.
Yeah, there's one VA loan per property. So you can't have a second VA loan on the same property unless you were to split the property. The choice, the options, if you want to have an ADU, is do a cash out refi, right? Take money out to build, or do a HELOC, take money out to build, get a personal loan, take money out, build. But there's only one VA loan on that property.
Stephanie, how does the equity? I don't know if that answers that. It does. How does his equity in that property come into play, either with the HELOC or the cash out? Where does he have to be to equity wise to be able to do that?
Yeah, usually you have to be at 80%, right? So you have to have, your equity has to be there. So like, if you just bought the house, you're probably not going to be there unless you had a significant down payment. But there are some lenders out there. I know we have some like credit unions or certain banks that let people go up to 90%, for a HELOC. So you really just have to do your due diligence and research a few different lenders, to see how much you could get out, right?
LTV wise, the most aggressive option would probably be the cash out. So if you've been there a little while, you've built up some equity, the VA cash out can be expensive depending on where you are with your funding fee and whether you're exempt or not. But it's probably going to be the most aggressive in terms of letting you at 100% and still have pretty decent terms there. So those are the two things, Jake, that you would want to check into there. We have another.
Want to look at all the options all laid out next to each other too, that would be my suggestion.
There's some ADU construction loans too, at least here in California. I'm not quite sure if they're everywhere, but ADUs are a big topic here, so there's definitely lending for that.
Well, when you're talking of financing availability, we're a little bit lucky in Southern California that there's a lot of finance companies, a lot of people with money looking to invest. So we often have options that other parts of the country may or may not have. But thinking less specifically about that, Jason, you had mentioned before the show some specific requirements. So even though the California government is really big on ADUs, wanting to create more housing, they also really love the government part of government. So there's lots of requirements relative to how many other states are handling the ADUs. So if you have a client who bought from you or is buying from you and they're interested in an ADU, what are some of the things, not loan and financing wise, but they need to be aware of what the government, state and local government may or may not allow them to do with their property?
I mean, it's an ever changing law, if you will, because ADUs are so hot topic, if you will. California is in a housing shortage. It's been that, at least in LA, San Diego, pretty much all of Southern California. Running out of space, want to build more homes, that type of situation. So they're really pushing individuals in the theory is that individually we will build these ADUs and kind of help that inventory. With that being said, they're making it easier and easier to build these ADUs. So, we went from where you could have one ADU to where zoning has been changed to, at least here in San Diego, I think every residential property is now considered an R3 zoning, meaning that you can build 2 additional units regardless where you live, they call it a primary ADU and a JADU. And even that has now kind of blurred. There's SB9, which now allows lot splits. So you can take your property, if you had like a 10,000 square foot property, build 2 ADUs, lot split it, build another primary home and build 2 more ADUs. And all of a sudden if you had the finances to support this, you could end up with 6 homes on your original lot. And then that just, it escalates even further beyond that. Going back to that kind of question though, is like, where they're very lenient on these ADUs and whatnot, then they also are very tight on some other aspects. So the idea of like a tiny home, depending on where that square footage lies, which I think is typically like under 200 square feet or 100 square feet. I mean, normally these are sitting like on a trailer or trailer platform. They don't allow them at least not as a primary resident. As an ADU, they are allowed, but they have to be on wheels. So it actually is almost more of like a small mobile home that's permitted. So what it really comes down to, Josh, and everyone out there, is that you need to research your local laws. And if you don't have the time, it's finding your local real estate experts and your team. You're building your team out in that local area that does know those laws, that can help research for you to find out if that is a possibility for whatever you're trying to build or move into.
It's complicated and it's changing really quickly. I thought you were going to point out the latest and greatest thing that we have now added in California is that after you split your lot and put 3 units on each property and have 6 units, you can do a condo conversion and sell them off individually as condos. So I know I have some friends that are investors up in Oregon that have been doing that. So again, varies from state to state. Some states, and you guys weigh in on Hawaii and South Carolina or anywhere along the East Coast, Washington and Oregon have pre-approved plans for ADUs.
San Diego does as well.
Okay, so there's a handful of builders that they have expertise in this. So you get expedited, reduced cost permitting for this. So you're not going to get to build your dream ADU exactly the way you want, but in a matter of 90 days, a lot of these can have ADUs on them. And we are going to be seeing more of these condo conversions of those, where we'll have things that look much more like a small single family or a small attached single family that will be sold as condos. So the government, state governments, they're trying to solve a housing crisis and an affordability issue, kind of leading back to what we talked about at the top of the show. But at the same time, it creates issues for realtors, for mortgage people, because all of this is like gray area that isn't really defined in our guidelines. So leading back to what Jason said, it really is important that you're working with someone that's an expert. Not that the expert is going to know these answers, but part of what Chris built here in the vetted VA community is attracting people that are willing to dig into the guidelines and do the research, because most of this stuff is not stuff you can know off the top of your head, and what you knew 6 months ago may not be true 6 months from now. In terms of that, Stephanie, Deb, either of you have anything interesting in your localities related to ADUs or anything that need to be aware of?
Well, I was going to say, the experts that you need are two experts, right? You need the expert real estate agent and the expert loan officer, because we're each looking at different things when it comes to these ADUs, right? I'm looking at a listing and I'm seeing, those kind of words that pop out to me in the listing description. Like it might say single family home, but it says things like second floor has its own kitchen, or this bedroom has its own access to the outside. So it'll have these certain terms that kind of make me realize this home might be an issue with the appraiser, or these are things we have to look at and make sure it's permitted. Is there a full kitchen in these spaces? And as a team with the real estate agent, what I'm asking them to do is, hey, go ask the listing agent, are they fully permitted? What's the status on this home? These things are the things I'm looking for in my area. But we have a big issue too. It was interesting you saying splitting it up and putting 6 units. We do have some unique property types, but our big issue, of course, is septic and cesspool. I live on the North Shore, Oahu, and pretty much all of our homes here are cesspool, not even septic. So it's difficult to put on an ADU and to have that permitted if you're not going to add septic at this point, which is another $30,000 to $50,000. So we're thinking about that. We've also, every neighborhood is different. I have had last year I had 2 clients that had almost the same exact home, right, in Honolulu. It was, a single family home with 4 bedrooms, but it had like this other space that had, it was an Ohana unit. They were both fully permitted, but one was legal conforming use and the other one was legal non-conforming use. And we had to pull out the stove on the second one. So, it's really important to have someone, that understands what this all means for your loan, because we get a lot of that for sure.
And all shades of gray here. So
all
it is important.
Different. Yeah. And then, the thing too, I wanted to mention is sometimes it's not officially an Ohana or a ADU, but what I'm also seeing is a lot of clients who want to see the potential of a second unit. Right. So having a real estate agent that understands like, oh, here's a home with an enclosed lanai, that could be, do you see the vision? Do you see the vision of a second unit on that property? And what are the legal ramifications for that? And you really need a good real estate agent who can explain that to you.
We actually have a couple more good questions here, and they're actually pretty simple and straightforward. But we have one here. Can I do a cash out loan for a house that I'm on the deed for, but not on the mortgage? So since we're here in the vetted VA group, I'm going to assume they're asking specifically VA, but I don't know if it varies from there. Deb, is that possible with a VA loan for them to be able to take cash out on a property that they are on title as an owner, but not currently a borrower?
Not unless they refinance that into their name, and they'd have to qualify under all the underwriting guidelines. So unless they're going to go ahead and put everything in their name, they're not going to be able to take out equity in the name of whoever that loan is currently and use that. Two separate things there.
Yeah, where is that other person, and are they would have to agree for you to do that?
Yeah. And maybe close the loop a little bit on that. We have 2 differences: who's on the mortgage and who's on title to the property. So in this situation, we have 2 people that are apparently on title and only one that's on the loan. So from that
happens
perspective,
sometimes, right? Lots of times, I find this with spouses. One will be, an income earner, and for whatever reason, the other spouse is not on the loan, but we'll put them both on title to make sure if anything should happen it's one or the other, it's a joint tenancy situation, that there would be no issue with that home going to either spouse. But yeah, that does happen where the mortgage note would be in one person's name and then the title in both. But again, they're two separate things. So if that one spouse wanted to take out, do a cash out to extract some of that equity, they would have to then be on the loan and go through all the underwriting.
All righty. And then we have another simple one here. How long do we have to live in the property as our primary residence before renting it out? So assuming here again, VA financing, it needs to be owner occupied. You buy it owner occupied. Do they have to live there for all 30 years of the mortgage, or how long are they agreeing to live in the property?
Well, the VA actually doesn't have a exact time limit. However, your lender does, and you will sign several pages of loan documents that say you are going to live in the home for a year.
And I think
the intention is there, right? So that you're intending to live in that home for a year. I think sometimes things might happen where, maybe you got orders to move sooner than you had anticipated, was not foreseeable, and things like that might happen. But yeah, you're going to have to sign papers that say you intend to live in that home for a year.
Intent is the important part there, because they're not saying regardless of what life brings you, you cannot leave this house if something unforeseen comes up. But they're not wanting you to use the loan to acquire a primary residence and then 6 months later acquire another primary residence and then come behind it, which with the VA, there are some limitations on that anyways. I think we've done a pretty good job of covering 2 to 4 units, of covering ADUs, of covering tiny homes. Anything that you guys feel like we left out in any of those? We went through tiny homes on that first question, kind of the important things that it just wanted to make sure. When I look at the tiny home stuff, and you see tiny homes on HGTV, they're almost always building them on wheels where they can move them around. If you're wanting to finance it with a mortgage, it needs to be real property, has to be permanently affixed to the foundation on land that you own. So it is a little bit different than kind of what everyone sees online or dreams or imagine is possible. So when we're talking about tiny homes, I think we're primarily thinking in terms of the size and the amenities of the home, and does it meet the VA guidelines? And a lot of times when people are asking us about it, they're thinking about the cool thing on a trailer that they can haul around the country. And when they decide they want to be in San Diego and then go to Charleston, that they can roll it across country and take it with them. So that's an important piece that I wasn't sure we were super clear on. But with that, why don't we just kind of go around the horn and wrap it up? And each of you can kind of, anything that you think we didn't cover in detail or that folks should know about any of these options, above and beyond just making sure you are taking your specific scenario to someone who knows and understands and can help with these things. Jason, I'm going to let the ladies have the last word, so you get to go first.
I don't think I have anything to really say about ADUs or tiny homes. I would say the only added information I would want to put out for people looking at just general multifamilies is speaking with their real estate agent and understanding, have them tell you what is common for like appreciation for multifamily in that area. What does the buyer pool look like? And why is that important to you? Is that, if you decide not to hang on to this multifamily, 3, 4, 5 years later, you PCS out of the area and you're like, I don't want to be a landlord anymore, and you want to sell it, just realize that, it's a different buyer pool buying multifamilies than it is buying single families. And then the other thing is that purchasing a multifamily, while there's, we've talked about the lending and we've talked about kind of general what to look for in that, is that because a lot of multifamilies are inherently, investor owned and they are rentals, there may be tenants in these rentals. And so showing these properties, at least here in Southern California, can be difficult. A lot of times these properties are, make an offer before, you drive by it, make an offer. If we accept your offer, then you get to go and investigate the property. So it's a little different, and just realize that that's not abnormal for that scenario. If you purchased a single family and then you're starting to look at a multifamily, you PCS or whatever, and your real estate agent goes, well, you have to make an offer before you can see it. They're not they're not necessarily telling you a lie. You know, that may be the actual case, because that is not I've ran into this before, and that's why I make it kind of apparent that, you know, buyers sometimes are like, wait, I have to make an offer before I even get to walk into the home. And it's like, yeah, that's the requirement for the multifamily, because they don't want to disrupt the tenants. They want to make sure your offer's strong offer before they accept it. Then they decide, hey, you know what, you are the best offer, we're going to accept it. Now we're going to schedule time for you to go and walk through. So that's my only kind of added info.
Strangely, tenants are not super keen on having multiple people walking through their house, looking at their stuff, checking things out when they may or may not be at home. So yeah, it's definitely something unique to that. Debbie, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of these multifamily homes. Obviously, it's a huge wealth building advantage, especially with the VA loan, no down payment. And if you can get into you know, a multi-unit like here in South Carolina, where you're spending under 500,000 to rent out 4 units, you know, the long-term picture for that could make huge gains for your financial landscape. I mean, just being able to, you know, collect rent on, you know, 4 units at $1,800 a pop eventually. But I would also say this, to consider maybe outside of your area, like for example, this loan that's closing tomorrow, he's making a little bit of a sacrifice in his commute to work, right? So he's decided to move out of the really populated areas of Charleston, and so his commute is a little bit longer, but it means he's making a tremendous investment, and he's going to basically live for free and have this great investment. So you might want to consider, you know, areas, you know, your surrounding areas as well, not just exactly where you live.
I don't think most people fully understand how much easier it is to buy the units as your first property, and then later on, once you get a family, whatever, and buy a single family, versus trying to do it the other way around. I failed at this miserably, but when I first got into the business, I had a couple of clients. The market was still not super hot in the late 90s. And so here in Southern California, under $300,000, you could get a 4-unit building. And I started looking around, I go, that makes all the sense in the world. I want to do that before I buy a house. And I got engaged and we bought a house, and we never ended up buying the $300,000 4-unit building. And to put it in context relative to Charleston, that $300,000 1997 fourplex is now about 2.1 million here in Southern California. So I wish I had had the foresight to buy that for my first property instead of the home that we did buy. So any of you watching, if you have the opportunity, it is a little bit of a sacrifice, whether you're doing it for affordability or just for opportunity. It can be a really big financial opportunity, the easiest way you'll ever have to acquire a rental property.
Absolutely.
Stephanie, you get the last word.
The last word. I'll go with a little word of caution. I do think that it's an amazing opportunity to buy these multifamily or a unit with an ADU. But think about if you want to be a landlord. You know, I think that might be one of the things why people move out quickly, you know, and don't stay that 1 year is, you know, they don't want to live with people. So I think it's something to really consider before you start jumping in, and, you know, find yourself a great team. And those are the 2 things.
Definitely great advice. So someone that knows the VA program, someone that knows your market. From the realtor side, it is important that they know the regulations and rules around all of this stuff in your area, because it does vary a lot from region to region. So we had a couple of questions here, whether this will be posted for replay. It will be in the Vetted VA Facebook group. It will also be on the Vetted VA YouTube channel. The majority of the views and traffic here is inside of the group, but there is a lot of content on the Vetted VA YouTube channel as well. So if you haven't checked it out, go out there, subscribe, like this video, and check out some of the other content. So again, appreciate the 3 of you being here with us. We're going to be off for the next 4 weeks, and then we will come back with another rotation of 8 shows, kind of going through important topics. So as we start the new year, that's when most people come out of the woodworks and start thinking of buying homes, getting into the real estate market. So we'll have some good seasonal information for you at that time. So again, thank you guys for watching. Thank thank the three of you for being here, and we will see you guys in a month.